Thanks again, everyone, for joining on time. Just giving a minute or two more for people to trickle in after their lunch hour, etc.
Hello, Henry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Hi, Chantal. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
Just a quick question. Will I be able to share my screen?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
You'll be able to share. You're a co-host now, but if we have any hiccups, we'll sort it out.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing partway through here and let you take over.
Okay, perfect.
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. I'm going to kick things off because we often end up with longer meetings, and we'll let people join the meeting in progress or catch up with the recording from our website or our YouTube playlist. Welcome to the Monadnock Broadband Group meeting. I won't do verbal introductions today just for the sake of time, but I would encourage you to say hello to everyone in the chat. Consider mentioning your affiliation and maybe some contact information too. That'll also help with our presenter and in understanding who's listening in today. I'll read out the purpose of the Monadnock Broadband Group. We're an informal coalition of municipal officials, practitioners, and other stakeholders with interest in understanding and coordinating relative to broadband issues in Southwest New Hampshire. MBG serves as a regional forum for education and peer learning on broadband-related legislation, funding opportunities, implementation models, and more. And my name is Henry Underwood. I work at SWRPC, and my role to MBG is staff support. You can also see our agency webpage dedicated to this group, where you can find past meeting information and agendas. And my contact information is, of course, there for you if you'd like to reach out afterwards. Thanks to those saying hello in the chat and introducing each other. And just as a reminder, I do my best to share the recording of the meeting the same week. So try to get that posted on the webpage in a day or two. Okay. Tips we're all pretty familiar with at this point, but I do see someone joining by phone. And for folks calling in, as a reminder, you can use *6 to mute or unmute yourself if you need to, or *9 to raise or lower your hand. Feel free to use feedback features during the meeting, thumbs up, thumbs down. Use the chat, try to monitor that during discussion periods. And as far as asking to speak, we're pretty informal here, as many of you know who've joined these, but I do appreciate folks using the raise hand feature during the meeting. Okay, I'll do a quick recap of our last meeting, which was way back in the spring. There are two of the bigger parts of the meeting were number one, a roundtable discussion. And this was kind of a time for a little bit of reflection. Over 3 years, our region achieved roughly half of towns entering into public-private partnerships. So put a big dent in broadband access. And the discussion involved participants reflecting on how their network was working today. Others spoke about projects that were like literally being built out, in the process of being built out, and some experiencing construction difficulties. And then there was a third group with a couple of folks joining that really actually hadn't delved into this topic too deeply yet. The community just kind of getting on the road to broadband improvement. So that was the roundtable discussion. And I also presented on a project that was made possible by the Monadnock United Way and the Keene Senior Center to look at digital literacy and access in our region. And the Keene Senior Center asked SWRPC to do the bulk of the work. And that's going to involve identifying practices to improve digital literacy. We conducted an organizational survey, an individual survey focused on older adults, and pulled together some data that tell the story about broadband access. So that's coming together in a report, actually as soon as next week, and I'll hope to share that at a future meeting. But one notable graphic I'll share is on the right there, and this is showing the proportion of households that have a broadband subscription. And the green or the greenish gray colored bar on the right is our regional statistic compared to the state as a whole and the nation. And what you can see is our region lags behind in access to internet or broadband subscriptions in the higher income groups. And we're similar to, as you can see, a much lower rate of adoption for lower income groups. That, of course, kind of ties into today's agenda, but there'll be more information like that in our report from that project. All right, today's agenda here. We'll start off with up to 30 minutes on FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP. There's some time for Mark LaLiberty or his colleagues from Department of Business and Economic Affairs to talk about what's going on with state work related to broadband. I'll do a very brief update on legislation that we were tracking at our last meeting, and then kind of open it up to the group for other updates and discussion. Cool. So I think not seeing any questions in the chat. Thanks to everyone who's introducing yourselves in the chat. I think I'll sort of set things up for this first agenda item on ACP and then turn it over to Chantal. The ACP launched just after our last MBG meeting in the spring, and it provides money for people who need broadband and devices. And it's a strategy to broadband adoption that I think many of you in this group would be interested in learning about, hopefully in promoting too. And to that end, I'm very pleased to have our guest from the FCC, Chantal, who is an education outreach specialist in their Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Thank you for joining us today, Chantal, and I'll end my share and let you take over.
All right, thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you guys for having me here. I'll just take a little bit of your time. I know I have 30 minutes, so I'm just going to jump right in. Before I get to my presentation, I just want to tell you a little bit about what it is that we do. I only see one person with their camera on other than Henry, but if you want to use the raise hand or if you want to use a thumbs up, feel free to do that. How many of us are aware of what the FCC does? And it's okay if you don't. Most people don't even know that we exist. Tom, do you know? You have a clue? You have an idea? You do? Okay. All right. So at least one person, or maybe two if you include Henry, So real quick, what the Federal Communication Commission does is our responsibility is to make sure that people have access to telecommunication services and devices, right? And when I say telecommunication services and devices, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Your cell phone, right? So that would be one of the things that we try to make available or accessible to everyone. Another example would be your television, your radio, things that we communicate with, services and devices that we use to communicate with as a community. We try to make that available and accessible to everyone. Now we do super or hyper focus on groups that are, sorry, I'm looking at myself, which is a little weird. Thanks, Henry. We do hyper focus on groups that are at risk of not having access to those telecommunication devices and services, right? So you've already pointed out, you know, sometimes it's based on income, sometimes it's based on, you know, being in the urban community or many different things. We hyper focus on seniors, veterans. We also, it's something that I wanted to say and it just slipped out of my mind. In a nutshell, we focus on many different groups that are at risk of not having access to these devices and services. And what my job is to educate the community on resources that the FCC has that can help bridge the gap with accessing telecommunication devices and services. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're going to jump right in. Okay, Henry, if you can give me a nod and let me know that you see like a yellow and blue screen.
Yep.
Okay,
Looks
perfect.
good.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Affordable Connectivity Program, better known as the ACP. We're going to talk about what it is, who's eligible, and how can households apply. So really quick, Henry, I think you did a really good job in telling everyone what the benefit is. It's a federal benefit or a federal program that offers a monthly discount to eligible households, a monthly discount on their internet bill, okay? That monthly discount can be up to $30. You heard me emphasize up to, so that does not mean that everyone will get the full $30. So that discount can be up to $30 off the monthly internet bill. If that household is located on tribal lands, then that discount can jump, here we go again, up to $75 off on their internet bill. So that is the first part of the program. There is a second part of the program that I want to bring your attention to. It is a one-time discount of up to $100 off the purchase of a laptop, desktop computer, or tablet. But there's a few little things to think about when we're talking about this second part of the benefit, right? So you think about all of the providers that's in the country, right? You have so many, it's hard to count, right? Well, only some of them have decided to offer the ACP program. All right, so now we're talking about there's a generated list in your area that lets you know who's offering the ACP program. Within that list, there's also providers who have decided to offer the second part of the benefit. That means out of the list of providers that are participating in the ACP program, some of them are also offering a discount on the connected device, okay? So that's something to keep in mind, and we'll get a little bit more into that in just a second. But that's what the benefit is about, up to $30 or $35 off of the internet bill and up to $100 off of the connected device. So the next thing people usually want to know is, okay, how do I qualify, right? So there are a lot of different ways to qualify. One way for a household, not an individual, but one way for a household to qualify is through the household income. And that is if the household income is at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Now, there's about 16 people on this call. How many of us know whether or not we're at or below the federal poverty guideline? How will we know that, right? Oh, Tom, you're so smart. I need somebody else because he knows it all already. I'm just
I filed a tax return.
Well, there you go. But for most people, it's very difficult for them to just automatically know where they stand within the federal poverty guideline. Well, I'm going to introduce you to the website, and it'll be an easy way for households to determine whether or not they meet the household income. But let's for now say that they don't meet the income, right? They don't meet the qualifications for income. Does that count them out of the program? No, it doesn't. If they don't qualify through the household income, they can qualify in other ways. A lot of people think they have to meet the household income and other ways. No, household income, that means you can maybe qualify some other way. Some of those ways is if at least one person in that household participates in the programs that you see on your screen here, and at least one of the programs that you see on your screen. So if you have one person in your household that receives SNAP or Medicaid or public housing, if the household is a part of the public housing program, if they receive Section 8. And so as I'm pointing out, or as you're reading some of the programs on this screen, I guarantee you that this list represents the people that you serve. And that's why it's so very, very important that we're talking to you all today, because you will be our conduit, or you will be our information connector from us, the program, to the people that could potentially participate, right? All right, so that's how some of the households can qualify. I also want to point out that if one person in the household receives a free or reduced school lunch or breakfast program, that is a big one. Especially during the pandemic, that got a lot of households signed up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. So I definitely want you guys to take a look at this list and see where you can, folks that you may know, households that you may serve that can possibly benefit from the program. All right. So the next question we usually get is, all right, I know what the program is. I know how I can qualify. How can I apply is usually the next question, and usually the final question, right? That's all people want to hear. How can I apply? Well, there's 2 steps to enrolling in the Affordable Connectivity Program, okay? We prefer for folks to go online at affordableconnectivity.gov and fill out an ACP application online. But let's face it, some of our households may not have access to online services to fill out this application online. Well, they can also mail in an application, right? I saw the light bulb go off, Tom. But other households can mail in an application, mail in a paper application. We just ask that however way you're filling out the application, we want to make sure the households are submitting all of their supporting documents at once. Now, you can come along later and update your application. That's quite possible for households to do, but we want to make sure our households are submitting as much of the needed information as possible that first go around, okay? And then let's say one household is approved to be in the program. The second step is to contact the participating provider. And I'm going to show you just where you can go to get that list, okay? So this is the part where I kind of go to our website, the affordableconnectivity.gov. This is what the website looks like. I love to give people a visual of the website in hopes that you all will go back and just kind of cruise through the website on your own. It has all of the information that I'm giving you in this presentation, It has all of that information plus more. There are certain things that I wanted to point out. If you go up to the right-hand top corner, that's where you'll sign in. If you're filling out the application online, of course, you have to, do a username and password, and then submit the information that's asked of you. That's also where you can download a paper application. You can also contact a contact number that I'm going to give you at the end of the presentation, and you can get a mail-in application that way as well. All right. Another part of the website I wanted to point out, this Do I Qualify tab. Let's pretend I just clicked that tab. So remember, we were talking about the household income and whether or not, any particular household, how would they determine if they meet the qualifications through their household income? Well, this is just an easy to use chart for those of us who don't know where we stand within the federal poverty guidelines. So it's at or below the federal poverty guidelines. I will look at my household size. We are a household of 5, it's a lot of us. And then I would go over and look at the income. If I'm at or below this income, then my household will qualify for the program. If I'm above, then I'm going to say, you know what, we don't qualify due to the income, but we may qualify through other ways, such as someone in the household at least participating in one of these programs. That's how that works. Okay, so I'm gonna go back up. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy by scrolling. All right, so we're back at the beginning of the application. I'm sorry, the beginning of the website. Another tab that I wanted to point your attention to is the companies near me. So I filled out the application, I've been approved. How do I know which providers to choose from? I'll click on companies near me. I'll put in my zip code, Henry. I took the zip code that was on your signature line. Hopefully this represents most of the folks that's on this call. Okay, so this will represent, and then I'll click ACP, but this will represent the providers that are in your area. Okay. And the household that was approved to participate in the program would select from one of these providers. All right. So that's how that would work. Okay. So let me go back to my presentation. That's pretty much the presentation about the program. But I also want you to think about outreach, because there was one thing that I realized, especially during the pandemic, that sometimes it's not the lack of resources, it's not knowing about the resources, right? And so one of our ways, or one of our strategies to get people and get communities to know about the Affordable Connectivity Program is to work through you all. We contact school superintendents, the mayor's office. I have a list here that I have to read from. We reach out to housing authorities, social workers, food pantries, Salvation Army. I think, Henry, you mentioned United Way. We reach out to United Way to get the information out about the program. We have request a presentation or request a speaker program where you can pretty much do what Henry was able to do. Send an email saying that I have a meeting. I would love someone to speak about the Affordable Connectivity Program. Can you, attend? And one of us will be assigned, and we will come out virtually and give you a presentation. This is an overview. We also have train-the-trainer presentations. We also have meetings with organizations who wish to conduct or do an enrollment event. So if you're interested in that, then I would suggest you reach out to us, okay? We also tried to build in outreach tools that you can just go ahead and visit at this website. You can visit our toolkit and you can download, copy, email, fact sheets or flyers or information about the program that's already available, and available not only in English, but in other languages as well. So this is kind of what that website, our website, fcc.gov/ACP, this is what that website looks like, okay? One of the additional resources we have is, let's say you looked at one of our flyers and you said, I really like this flyer. I serve about 300 people that I know would need this flyer. Well, we would encourage you, if you don't have other resources, to get the copies to your constituents. What we would like, or what we would hope to do, is to be able to make those copies for you and ship them out to your address. Okay, we've been able to do this since the program started back in January. As far as I know, we've been able to meet every request that we have received, and we've received quite a few already. But what you would do is you can send me an email, chantel.virgil@fcc.gov. You put in the description of what the document is that you want, how many copies you need and what languages, and your shipping address. And we hope to be able to ship that out to you at no cost. All right, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. If I'm biased, but I really think that's a great program that we have currently at the FCC. All right, so now you see the resources page. That means I am done, okay? This resources page is, just some phone numbers, email addresses, anything that you might need concerning the Affordable Connectivity Program. The most important resource on this page would be the ACP Support Center. That will link you directly with the folks that will be handling the application. So if you have any application questions or concerns, you need to update your application or whatnot, you would contact the ACP Support Center. You can send them an email, or you can give them a phone call. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. That was great. Are there questions for Chantel? Please just unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
So this is Mark Liberty. I'm over at Business and Economic Affairs with the Broadband office. And it's funny, we just came from a conference a couple of weeks ago, the Shelby conference, and just got off with a group that was talking about ACP. So it's certainly a subject that's top of mind with us right now. One of the questions and concerns that came up with ACP is that even with a lot of the guidance, a lot that's out there, there's a lot of people who begin the process, even if they get to that point, and either because of paperwork, because of language barriers, because of other things, really struggle with completing the application, and either paperwork gets rejected or they abandon the process altogether. Is there any ability or thoughts at the FCC to simplify some of these processes? Is this kind of an iterative process where you hear these sort of comments and then try to simplify or do whatever you can to kind of make it even more user-friendly with each version?
Absolutely. We definitely try to make it as user-friendly as possible, while also recognizing the multiple challenges that we're up against. I've heard, Henry, you said the words digital literacy a lot. So when you have folks who aren't necessarily savvy with computers and they're filling out an online application, that can be a challenge. Just submitting the documents so that they're legible can be a challenge. There's so many challenges that we ourselves hear about when it comes to the ACP program and filling out the application. I would say the best advice that I can give organizations that you all represent is to kind of coordinate with local organizations that can help your household fill out the application. So, for example, when it comes to Medicaid and filling out that application, or when it comes to more widely known applications, there's usually an advocacy group, there's social workers, there's usually a system of people that are available to help households navigate the application process. Now, I can't, for these purposes, it's very difficult to talk about what we can do to make the application more user-friendly. I think it's more advantageous to talk about what organizations in the community that exist right now that can kind of hold the hands of the applicant and walk them through the application process. I think that's where we see the process going better than when someone is trying to fill out the application on their own. Okay. Any other questions?
I have maybe a deceptively simple one. How detailed is the application, like in terms of minutes, or could you give us a sense of that?
So the application pretty much is straightforward. And you can always request to train the trainer. And what we'll do in that presentation is like go through the application and just point out tips of what to avoid or what the question is actually asking. So it's, straightforward as far as I think it's maybe five pages, but a lot of that is tips, or this is what we mean when we ask you, for your name. You want to give the same name that's going to appear on the documents that you're going to submit, right? Or we're going to ask you to submit certain documentations based on the information that you're giving us here. But it's usually your name, some type of way to identify the applicant, whether it's a social security number or some other identifiable number. And then you quickly get into how do you qualify? And there are many different options to qualify, which means there are many different options to say, okay, yeah, this is how I qualify. Now I know I need to submit this certain type of documentation. The last part of the application just goes over, it asks the applicant to initial certain details that they need to understand about how the program works. And it literally asks for their initials and then their signature at the bottom, and then they submit the application. If you would like, if you're able to go to affordableconnectivity.gov, you click on sign in, you can actually download the paper application there and take a look at it yourself and just to see like some of the information that's being asked on the application. Also, an important resource that many people don't know about, if you go under the tools tab of the website, there is a document there that will tell you, hey, if you qualify this way, this is the type of document you need to submit, right? So they'll kind of give you, it's a guide to decide what type of information you're going to need to submit with your application. And I think that's missed a lot. There's also instructions on that tools page to help you fill out the application as well.
That's helpful. Other questions from attendees?
All right.
I have maybe one quick one while people are thinking. I know this program was on the heels of related program, the emergency broadband benefit that some people might remember. And my understanding was this new program was essentially continues through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And does that mean that it's going to be available for 5 years?
Well, there's no timeline for exactly how long the program would go for. It's more based on the amount of funds that's available. So for the emergency broadband benefit, that was a direct reaction from the pandemic and how much we needed to have a program that helped bridge the digital gap or the broadband gap during a time where broadband was needed the most, right? So then that program was given, I believe, $3.2 billion. I believe that's the number, $3.2 billion. Well, then Congress came back and said, you know what, we want to improve the program, and we also want to launch this new improved program with more money. I believe the program was given $14 billion to operate. So when you start talking about funding for a program, if there's a certain number that has been funded for the program, that would suggest that once that funding runs out, what will happen? And right now, we have not been given any direction as to what's going to happen to the program once the funds are completed or depleted.
Great, that's helpful to know. Last call for questions, I guess. Anything else? This was great. Really appreciate you joining this part of the meeting, and love it if you could drop a link or your contact information in the chat. You're very welcome to stay through the rest of the agenda if you want, but otherwise, move on when you need to, Chantel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me your time, your attention, and I'll definitely drop my contact information in the chat. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Well, encourage everyone to take a look at those links following the meeting, especially the outreach content. I was really impressed that so much of this stuff is pre-made and ready to go. So take a look at that. We can move on the agenda, and I noticed both Mark and Matthew joined the meeting just a moment ago. Wanted to list BEA separately on the agenda because a lot really has been going on since our last meeting in April. As I think of it, the office was really getting established at that time, but over the summer there's been a lot of activity and products. Some of those are appear in the bullets on the right, and definitely invite Mark to edit that, but they include an RFP from the state relative to mapping, as well as funds for infrastructure improvements. And one of those rounds recently was awarded funds, although my understanding is we don't know to whom yet. And the second
we know.
round, we do. Okay.
We know.
So Mark, I've probably done enough setup, but I really just saw this time as a chance for you to share like some of what you've been up to, and hopefully have some time for some Q&A.
Absolutely. Now it's frustrating because I think in so many of the other meetings that we've had, it's like things are coming, give us patience. It's great to be able to go into a meeting and say things are here. And the biggest one by far, and I mean, it's less of an issue, less of probably a benefit to the Monadnock area, but it's certainly a benefit to the state and the rural areas. So on last Wednesday, the Governor and Council approved a $50 million RFP, the round one, to the New Hampshire Electric Co-op to build out 23,200 plus properties, locations throughout the state of New Hampshire, within 6 counties, within 78 towns. It was really exciting that we were able to do this because we are now finally being able to say, here's something tangible. I can give you kind of a little bit of a detail on hold on a second. Very loud in my office, so I just had to say I was in a meeting. We're in an open space. So anyways, so what happened was, so we had a very competitive process. As you could use the scoring, if you hadn't seen it, we posted that on our website. It was very close between Consolidated and the New Hampshire Electric Co-op. There were some very competitive bids. In the end, the co-op just really had it. They both had great plans. It was, and the one thing that we're really excited about is the co-op has said both that they expect to do build out above and beyond the 23-2, plus they also have an expectation to be done very quick, hopefully by the end of 2024. We're not going to hold them to that necessarily. They have till the end of 2026 to do build out, but they seem to be very ambitious and aggressive in their timelines, and so that's things that they've been saying, and they've been telling a lot of different people. So we're very positive and upbeat on that. So much so that we decided to do a second RFP of $40 million. And again, I think that we were very excited about what came to our office. We were very excited about the process. We were very excited about everything that came about that, and thought that this is a very effective, efficient way to get money out the door and to get high quality internet to the areas of the state that need it. So like I said, what came out of to us was very exciting. So that will mean that we'll have a $90 million of our capital projects fund will be committed to these RFPs, and like I said, really aggressive build outs. The second part of it, and before we go to anything else, the second part, and it sort of gets hidden, but actually I think this is just as important, is the mapping. That also got approved. And I'm going to let Matt go into it because he did a lot of work with the mapping, and I'm sure you guys have some questions on that as well.
Good afternoon. So our mapping, our vendor that was also signed with Governor and Council on Wednesday was with UNH to do our broadband mapping in the state. The premise behind that is they're going to be on a fabric, on an address fabric, much like the FCC is doing one, but ours is obviously independent. We wanted to go an independent route. A lot of other states are going with the big national carriers like CostQuest and Lightbox that give a great presentation. They're really good maps. However, within the FCC mapping comes a challenge process, and we're under the assumption that if we use the same cookie cutter approach that the FCC is using and all the other providers, other states are doing, then what are they really going to be able to challenge if all the data is the same? So we've gone with UNH to produce our fabric into our broadband mapping. They will also be doing mapping on fiber in the ground, middle mile, and so forth, so that we get a real good understanding of where we are. And then as these RFPs fill in more serviced areas, we'll actually be able to see, a live evergreen map of changing colors right before our eyes, so that we can, really, everybody can really understand what we've done and what we still may need to do in the infrastructure.
So as you can tell, I mean, very excited about where we stand with the mapping, and more, and we went to a conference a couple of weeks ago down in DC, and more we were just really hearing other states were asking us about that, because I think they're trying to, some of them like Georgia and a couple other places are very aggressive and very foresight about mapping, but others are still trying to figure that out. So there was that. So beyond that, the other part of it you noted in here is the broadband consultant RP. We want to make sure that we have somebody that can help us and help the communities with their broadband questions, especially capital projects funds. Now, the tricky part of it is capital projects funds has to be separate from other pots of money. So any work that you're doing, anything that you're reaching out to us, has to be anything like with Broadband Match Grant Initiative, or any questions you have with us, or so on and so forth. We have to keep the pot separate. That's going to be really important with infrastructure, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But we still think there's great value in having a consultant work with us, making sure that anyone that's working with the feds in terms of regulatory issues has someone that's going to work with them and work with us and all of that. So we have that out and about. We hope to have somebody lined up by the beginning of the year. And again, as noted, and it was the same as with Gopher, we want it to be a resource to the communities, and we'll make sure the communities know that this resource is also for them, not just for us. I think that was something that came up in some early conversations with you all, Carroll County, Powassan County committees, is that we want to provide resources, that you all can access as well. So there's that. And so that is capital projects fund. So before I move on to infrastructure or anything else, does anyone have any questions on what we've said so far? Wow.
I have a quick question, Mark, while people are thinking on the consultant RFP. Would an activity like you said, you know, there's kind of silos of funding, right? The capital projects funding is separate from the funds through the NTIA's BEAD program. Could though, like a consultant working for the state help a town, for example, negotiate the BEAD program, or is it really mostly just the people being awarded capital projects funding?
Well, it's funny you say that, and I'll get into that after. We have to keep the money, we have to keep it separate. I thought you were going to talk about SLFRF, which is more of a gray area, and I can talk with the Treasury about that because it's both, that's ARPA. So there may be a mechanism there, but with terms of infrastructure, it has to be separate. But as I was going to go into after, we will be doing an identical RFP for infrastructure. We kind of have to. It's, trust me, it's not where we're at. Oh, so Tim's got a question. In light of the 50 million award to New Hampshire, which is Grafton, what is the Grafton County Broadband Committee trying to do with a separate funding application for county-wide middle mile fiber? That's their thing. That's their jam. So middle mile, and I guess this is a good segue into infrastructure. So middle mile is an infrastructure program. This is a separate pot of money. It's not an emergency appropriation. It is separate. It's much more traditional. And the smallest, and one that didn't actually involve the state of New Hampshire, other than we have to give oversight, is the middle mile program. The feds provided $1 billion, which seems like a lot, but is minuscule compared to other programs, toward building out middle mile. As far as I understand, only 2 entities applied in the state of New Hampshire for that, which was Grafton County, and they had a plan, and First Light, and they had a plan. Both of them came to us. Both of them gave us very good presentations. Both of them were able to get letters from the governor's office to endorse their plan. I know that the congressional delegation worked with both of them as well to give letters. So they're pretty well established plans. Slight problem, $5.2 billion of applications came in for the slightly less than $1 billion. So the odds are, you know, the math itself says there's an 18% chance that any one entity could get it. California asked for 3.2 billion. So the feeling there is that we're not optimistic that either one of them are going to get any middle mile. Again, that has not been a huge priority for the state of New Hampshire. Not that we don't see value in it. I mean, one of the bigger owners of middle mile is DOT, but we saw that as, okay, if this is something that gets these guys to talk about it and they want to do something with it, that's great. They can do it. We're not going to necessarily stop them or get them in their way. However, there may be opportunities within BEAD. So, and for those, like I said, everyone knows what BEAD is, but just as a refresher, BEAD is the $42.5 billion kind of catch-all plan for broadband equity deployment. And there's a lot that goes with that. And there's a middle mile element to that as well. So I think for us being able to kind of revisit this at a later time to determine whether or not this is needed, whether or not there's partnerships that can happen amongst themselves or with the state, that's something we can discuss at a later time. But yeah, again, I'm not going to tell somebody don't do it. If that's something they think there's value to, that's fine. But and we had to be consulted with it for them to apply. They had to come to us and tell us, and we were more than happy to have the meeting, but it really wasn't something we were focusing heavily on. So that's what's going on there. In terms of BEAD, in terms of actually infrastructure, the thing we have an RFP that's going to be going out very shortly. We were approved for $525,000 to have someone write a digital equity plan for the state of New Hampshire. Every state has to do this. It's a step one. And then each state will get for 5 years a set amount of money to use for digital equity efforts. So we're going to have an RFP that goes out for that. I know I've talked to a bunch of people have reached out to us for some general questions. We're kind of keeping it somewhat quiet because we don't want to bias it, but we're going to have that come out very shortly. I'm just having the Fed look over some language to make sure that we're covering everything in our RFP. And that's going to go out. And once that happens, someone will write us a plan. ACP is a big one in that. We've been going to meetings about ACP, and we recognize that New Hampshire doesn't have a big uptake on it. And so looking at really, and people we've talked to said, well, you have this amount of use, so you have this amount of use. Well, I think like with mapping, it's probably going to be really important for us to get a real sense of what the issues are. So I can envision that as something working with different partners, some in this room, to help us with that and get some resources out for that. So it's something we're looking at. Because we've always thought that capital projects fund was us to do the build out, set the table, and if IIJ has a real opportunity to bring people to the table. So we're working on that. In terms of BEAD, we've put out some ideas on what we'd like to do. We need more staff. And so we're going to be trying to do some more staff through BEAD. Also through, actually, and I forgot to mention in capital projects, we're looking to hire an accountant and to go along with our consultant. So we have somebody working on that. We are really looking at what we can do, because we're staff of 2. We're going to need more. We're going to need somebody that's going to be really focusing on digital equity. So we're looking for staff or that somebody that's looking at working on BEAD and projects there, just on that. A field person, somebody that's going to go out in the field to kind of look at the different work that's being done. We're looking at that. And even beyond that. So that's one of the focuses on BEAD. And then the other part of it is, if we do as much build out as we hope we can with capital projects, BEAD becomes a real opportunity to address that connecting anchor institutions and whatever, and there's a 5-year plan that has to be written to look at the various options, what's available. One thing that we've been really pushing at is what resources are available for cellular and 5G. Because I know in the Monadnock area, that's a huge issue. Jay Kahn called me a lot about that. And so it was important that we say, okay, what is it, even if it doesn't seem like it's in the realm, is it in the realm? So what we pepper NTIA with questions on what can we do, what can't we do? And they get back to us and say, okay, we still haven't figured this out. We're looking at it. I still think there's a lot that's not really known about BEAD. How much money has to be committed to the various bureaucratic levels? We don't know how much we're going to get. We've heard as little as, it's 100, and, we've heard, as little as, 140, as much as the sky's the limit. You can look up online, published numbers of how much you think New Hampshire's going to get. We don't know what that number is. So it's hard to commit to that. And I don't want to say, oh, we're going to get X and it's this ridiculous number and it's half that. So that's part of the challenge too. We don't know what we're going to get. So we've actually really been focusing very heavily on capital projects fund, and as time moves forward, start going into BEAD. So Tim has a question. What are the deadlines? Why are the deadlines so short in the state's broadband RFPs? Because we want to build out. We want built out as quick as possible. We are racing against supply chain, inflation, every state looking to get out as much build out as humanly possible, trying to find any sort of workers as we can. If the challenges that exist with that will then never with a recession, that very well could happen. I think, and in the end, the political will. I mean, this governor and this office and you guys and the towns and the ISPs, everyone said we need to do build out and let's get to it. I think there was enough's enough, I think is the feeling. We've gone years and years, and now we have the resources. Let's use the resources. Let's do it. And so I think that was what was so exciting, but this hamster wheelish about all of it. And Matt can tell you all about that. So that's, I think, why we are so moving as we are. And I know for good and bad or whatever, I do think we kind of know where we know a lot of where the areas are. We know what people want. People want fiber. They want broadband, and whatever the mechanism is that we can get them what the feds want and the people want, we're going to do. And that's how we're working. So that's, I didn't mean to kind of go off on that diversion, but Tim kind of threw me a bone there. Yeah. So that's where we're at right now. I see Henry's got a big smile on his face. It sounds like he's got another question or comment.
You're good read, Mark. This is building off of the deadline item, and for folks to know, this round 2 RFP process has proposals due at the end of November. I guess my question was, although we work with many towns, they're less likely, really, I think, to be applicants to this. But do you feel there's still an opportunity for towns and others to take with providers or anyone else to, basically better their chances or be included in a proposal that reaches you?
I have to be very careful because this is
Sure.
live. I mean, the towns can do whatever they want. I mean, towns can have any discussions they want. That's immaterial to us. I can't tell you what you cannot do. I mean, towns can do what towns are going to do, and towns do what they do. As a former selectman, I know that. And sometimes people will say, well, you can't do that. It's like, we can. But yeah, you can, you guys, I mean, we got your letters. Many letters, and we did read them, and we did open them, and we did file them, and we looked at them, and we know that we know what was important to some communities, and that's part of the process.
Other questions for Mark or for Matt?
Many letters.
I saw one hand up. I think it was Alfred Eisenberg. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks. Sorry, I joined late, but I seem to have come in on the right part that I had a question about. The current RFP seems still to be targeted towards like maximum number of connections for the lowest cost. So I'm just wondering, when do the hardest to reach, lowest density places get on the train?
Well, that would be BMGI, and I didn't go into that. Now, first of all, I think the good part about round 1 is that I do think even some of those areas are going to get covered. I mean, we've looked at some of those areas and we're very impressed. And I mean, we're impressed with a lot of what's in that round 1. BMGI, the trick is, this is the tricky part. So BMGI is, we're trying to get through rules, and rules have been kind of a landmine. I don't know why. We've been having some struggles with Office of Legislative Services. I think they're short-staffed, and they've been very helpful when we've been able to work with them. So we have to get the rules off the ground. And we'll get the rules off the ground. We will then have a 2-month broadband matching grant. Yes, Henry. Then we're going to have basically 2 months where we're going to kind of work with the providers, you all, everybody of interested party to say, okay, this is what the application is going to look like. This is what the program is going to look like. This is what the rules look like. Here's an FAQ, and to a point where we're even going to do a first round FAQ. Everyone looks at it, make sure that everyone's comfortable with it. If there's any mistakes we've made or things that they want clarified, we'll do another version of it. And then at that point, when that program is off the ground, that is where we kind of get that really tough to hit area. And that's the program. Again, as a reminder, 75% go to unserved and underserved areas. I think part of what's nice is that because we're doing these RFPs, we'll once both of them out there, we'll have a real sense of what's still outstanding, and we'll have the mapping to kind of back it up. And so that's when, by the time BMGI happens, we'll have 2 RFPs out, mapping, and just real sense of, okay, what are the challenges? And so that's where we stand on that. We're very much committed to that. There will be $26 million of that for that. And our plan is to adjust the rules when we get to infrastructure so that BMGI can also be a mechanism within that program. And remember, if we have a minimum of $100 million and we expect to get more, much more, what that number is, we don't know. That should be the type of resource that will help really clean up some spaces. And that's what we're hoping to do. And because of the changes of law we made, we should be able to convert it from capital projects on the BMGI because it's based on funding guidance. It's not based on RSA. It's not based on set things that the FCC says or set federal law. It is based upon federal guidance. So I think that gives us the flexibility to maneuver. There may be some challenges in how we do rules, but we'll deal with that at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. originally there was going to be, it seemed like there was going to be 66 million or something for BMGI. Now there's only 26 million, which means there's less of a chance that we'll make it into this next round after the round 2. So
Well,
we may
I
have to
think-
wait for B after that, I guess.
I think for us, the mission in our office has been as many houses as possible and just as many people to be built out as humanly possible with broadband. And I get it. I mean, we could do 99% with all of this. That 1%, it's a binary thing. It's where am I? I mean, and I get frustrated because I would love to be able to do that. So we just wanted to really look at it and say, what is going to get the most bang for our buck? And so that's why the second RFP came about. But I think that we're committed to BMGI. Like I said, it's 26 million, and then whatever it takes within BEAD to complete the job. So it may be a little bit longer, but at the same time, we're not straying from it. And so we're really working to make sure that it is both a functional resource and B, something that can close the loop completely. Because the feds want 100%. We'll see how close we can get to it. The feds want 100%, and they really want high quality internet in that 100%. So we take that seriously. Accounting. Who's accounting? Somebody had accounting. Can you give a timeline for round 11 award and BMGI awards? Oh, Croydon. Oh, and around, I assume you mean round 2. The deadline, our expectation is to have something in mid-December in terms of working with an entity. We're gonna, and then sometime hopefully in early to mid-January, go to governor and council and to announce the second round winner. BMGI, it's going to be based on rules. Once we can get to rules and then have that time where we can do an education process, that's when we're going to do. So I don't know. I can't give you a definite on BMGI. I can give you a pretty good one on the round 2. And like I said, and at that point, we'll have a pretty good idea of when the build outs are going to be complete from whoever wins the round 2. And like I said, round 1, co-op has said they're trying to get stuff done by the end of 2024, though they do have until the end of 2026, theoretically.
Thanks everyone for the question so far. One more in the chat.
Does BEAD go through capital projects fund? No, BEAD is separate. That's, I know, Alfred, you got in late. No, BEAD is a separate funding mechanism, totally separate from capital projects. Capital projects is part of ARPA, so it's very different rules, and we have to be very diligent and I was going to say, we have some federal people here. We have to be very diligent in keeping those funds separate in both our conversations with U.S. Treasury and capital projects funds, and with NTIA, with BEAD, and with digital equity. They're separate entities, and we need to really kind of treat them as such. And we will. And we're looking at mechanisms to really be able to work with them in our office. So I was going to say, like I said, I see some congressional people, so I don't know if they have any questions or concerns or comments. I must have answered all their questions. By the way, to the congressional people, our old boss, my old boss, Tina Chasm, came in and spoke today. So we're very excited to see her back. She now works at Senator Shaheen's office and does a lot of business work, and she's very good at her work job, and we miss her dearly. Tim, how will the state factor geographic equity in reviewing proposals? Again, I think for us, it's really doing as much build out as we can in the round 2. And then in terms of broadband matching grant initiatives, it's the initiative of the communities and working with the ISPs. And we reckon that in itself, I think, addresses those geographic issues, because it's an open process for everyone. Again, I think part of it is the mapping. We'll see it in the mapping. We really, like I said, we really feel like the most important thing is to do build out. And as we saw with round 1 with the co-op, they did address a wide swath of rural and unserved and underserved areas. I think the entities that apply in round 2 are going to do that as well. I can't promise you anything. Again, I'm not saying anything that I know or don't know. We don't know anything, but I'm hopeful of that. And then, like I said, after that, we'll evaluate, we'll look at BMGI. We'll have that education process working with you all and going to next steps. And then again, and then we have BEAD. And again, we'll see and BEAD gives us some real opportunities. And that may give us some opportunities to address some of those maybe most challenging geographic areas. And so we're looking at that again, constant questions to NTIA, we meet with the statewide broadband leaders network. We talk to a lot of people. We want to make sure we do it right. We want to be as efficient as we can with the funds.
Thanks, Mark and Matt, for packing so much info into such a short amount of time. I guess we can leave it there, but maybe if you're still have a question nagging you, drop it in the chat. Otherwise, we can move on with our agenda.
Well, thank you very much for everything.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Unfortunately, I have to jam off to yet another meeting, so it's been one of those days.
It's Monday. Thank you both. So our next agenda item, I'll cover very briefly on some legislative updates. And these are actually from the session that was resolved over the summer, or in the spring, but because of the timing of our meetings, wasn't able to update everyone on their status. So between our last meeting, this one, some changes have happened, and I'll just briefly go over these. And SB 247, which had the short title relative to broadband infrastructure bonds, would have allowed a town or a county to finance a broadband project at any location in a town, not just an unserved location. And this bill didn't leave the Senate committee, and it was referred to what's called interim study by that committee. So this one didn't continue farther in the session. 273 was signed by the governor in June, and this was what I think of as kind of a smaller tweak. It allows towns to approve broadband infrastructure bonds at special town meetings without having to get like special permission, basically, through the Supreme Court. SB 395. This was related to the matching grant initiative. It was signed by the governor in the summer, became effective in August. And this bill established a wireless kind of part of the broadband grant fund, again, that would be administered by BEA, like other programs. That had sponsorship from Senator Khan, which Mark mentioned. And then the last one we were following was SB 445, which was signed by the governor and effective in June. And this was also related to the broadband matching grant fund, and it adjusted the grant funded fraction in a good way. It was originally set up as a 50-50 share between the fund and some combination of a provider, a town, or a communication district. And it adjusted that so that only 25% must come from a provider, a municipality, or communication district. So that was a change there. And as far as the upcoming legislative session, right now there's a process called legislative service requests that is ongoing, where legislators basically ask for a bill number for different proposals. And there are a couple of hundred out there right now. None of them came up with the terms broadband or internet. So I don't have any new info for you to share for state legislation. And I didn't have any other updates to offer, but I would welcome updates from federal delegation staff that might be on today. Oh, I see there's a quick question about SB 445 having to do with the broadband matching grant initiative. And if anyone wasn't clear, that is not available yet. This is, Mark wouldn't even share approximate time frame. I think it's definitely after these round 1 and round 2 things are closed, or but so there's nothing available yet. All right. Are there any folks from that might have federal legislative updates or questions about legislation? Okay. So we'll move on then, although we can bring it back if we need to. I'd just like to open it up to all attendees to really take the opportunity to share something's on your mind, something you've been working on. Maybe it's something you'd like to see at a future MBG meeting. Tom, did you turn on your video because you'd like to share?
No, not
Okay.
really.
We've been one question I have, if either Tammy or Renell is available, I'm so curious to hear what other regions are doing relative to broadband bonding right now, between the uncertainty about these programs and I assume interest rates going up. Curious if there's any news there.
Hi, Henry. I haven't seen an awful lot. I think we have maybe one community that might be moving forward with a financing. Tammy, I think that's all we've got so far.
Yeah, town of Winchester.
Yeah, but would they approve theirs though last year, I believe. So I haven't really seen too many folks reaching out to to talk about the process for bonding. So kind of curious. I'm sort of in my process right now where I reach out to all my clients anyway. So I expect, over the next week or so to hear back from everybody. And, we'll certainly, Tammy, I'll definitely let you know if we hear of anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are having a January sale. Winchester has a bond issue for broadband. So we're able to put that tax exempt bond into our taxable bond, in our tax exempt issue. But like I said, and like Renell said, that's all we've heard so far as broadband projects needed to be bonded through the bond bank. Yeah, so we will see. I mean, interest rates are rising, but they're not as horrible as everyone thinks. They're, they're still, they're, we just did a 25-year preliminary analysis, and when we had an interest rate of 3.66% in June, and it's coming in at 4.25%. So it's, in perspective, it's not horrible, but but what's good is that all of those broadband projects that went into the market as taxable got extremely low rates, so they went in. It was good timing.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you both for sharing. Would anyone else like to share something they're working on, or maybe it's a reaction to the ACP content we heard?
The ACP stuff looked kind of interesting. I was thinking if we could pull together the application material and stuff, that we might be able to do like a workshop or something at the town library to help people to get that filled out. Because I do think we probably have some people who are intimidated by the level of paperwork that's involved there. I quickly tried to go through it while she was talking and quickly ran into, oh my goodness, this is more work than I expected. So there's that. I was kind of wondering, I wouldn't really expect there to be much of an answer right now, but maybe a topic for the future. Now that for towns that have broadband, that have gone out and done the townwide thing, now that you have it, what can the town do from a town perspective to take better advantage of it? You know, are there things that people have done, maybe in the town offices or the administration, you know, projects and things that have leveraged broadband in ways that you weren't able to do things prior? I'm basically just looking for good ideas to bring back to the town and say, hey, here's a project that somebody did over in some other town, and now we could do a thing like that because we have this infrastructure. So that's just a kind of a question.
I like those ideas. Tim Wessels, you have your hand up.
I do.
Go ahead.
I wanted to mention that, and maybe if Jeff McIver from Consolidated is still on the meeting, the first wave of towns that bonded and built in public-private partnerships with Consolidated were originally connected to the Consolidated fiber network. And now Consolidated has rebranded what it's now calling its Fidium fiber network. And there actually is more than just the change in the name. So the earlier towns that bonded and built in partnership with Consolidated are going to be alerted by Consolidated that anyone in town who's got a fiber connection with them will need to have the optical network terminal and the fiber modem replaced in their house as they are moved, basically, from the Consolidated fiber platform to the Fidium fiber platform. I volunteered myself as the first person in Ringe to do this. And by and large, it went well. It does take a truck roll because the installer has to replace your ONT, and he also needs to replace your fiber modem. The good news is it keeps all your SSIDs intact and doesn't take very long to do. The only downside I've noticed is that my public-facing quote unquote dynamic IP address actually started changing quite frequently. And this actually posed several problems for some streaming applications that I use, as they thought I was no longer in New Hampshire, but in Maine, and wanted to know if it was really me in Maine or somebody else using my account in Maine, because they now want to recover, fees from all these other people who you may have given your username and password to. Well, my public IP address actually changed about 6 times since the middle of August. And now it seems to be rather stable, but it does indicate that I'm in Portland, Maine, which I'm not, but things seem to have settled down. So I just want to alert people that if you have certain streaming services that are pretty nosy about, who's making this connection, you may get questions in your email about, was that really you or not? And also, if you have services that are keyed to a public IP address, you may find that they suddenly stop working, or that once you correct them, you find that your public IP address changes again. As of this point in time, maybe Jeff, if he's on the meeting, can mention it. I have no way of getting into the replacement fiber modem that was put in my house. So I don't know how to access it to change a few things that I might like to change. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but if Jeff's around, maybe he can speak to that.
Hi, Tim, and hi, everyone. Tim, actually, if you could shoot me an email on that item alone, I'll definitely follow up with the team. Tim had also made some good points, and I believe that the most recent 13 towns to build to go on the public-private partnerships with us the timing that you had switched over was when we announced that Fidium fiber piece. So Tim being from Ringe, they were part of our original 9 that included those CARES towns. When residents signed up, it was on the consolidated fiber, not Fidium fiber side. So we've been working with town leads such as Tim and talking with them about the Fidium fiber and talking about the benefits for residents to switch over to the Fidium fiber side from consolidated fiber. Like Tim had pointed out, there are some product updates with there. The pricings is different. So there's definitely a benefits for residents to switch over. Since our initial discussions or with the towns, we have called residents, and we most recently completed a first round of emails that went out to residents. So we're trying to get word out as quick as possible about those benefits of switching over to Fidium fiber. But Tim, in regards to the IPs, I definitely can get somebody from our team that I know will be able to provide you with better answers than what I could provide with you at this time. I also would be, I can put my contact information in the chat box. So, for towns that we have partnered with, if there are any questions or anything that I can help out with, please, send an email my way or feel free to give me a call. Also, if you're a town that we haven't partnered with and you'd like to have conversations, we'd love the opportunity to talk with you and to see what we can figure out.
Thanks for joining today, Jeff, and for the response. Any other updates to share? And after that, I'll start to wrap things up, I think. Okay. I think we can wrap it up here. I'm going to put a short feedback form in the survey in the chat box. It's just 3 questions, and would love some feedback on how you felt today's session went. And if you have ideas for future agenda topics, I believe you can add those to the other comments section of the form, or any other feedback that isn't a multiple choice question. And if there isn't anything else, I'll close it out today. Really thank everyone for joining today's MBG meeting.